Here we go! Get ready for some M+ action because it's looking like Affliction is turning a 180 and might be the best spec for dungeons, at least from the Warlock class. A new spell, Malefic Rapture, changes the dynamic of the spec. That and Unstable Affliction working differently kinda makes Affliction a different beast. We test these different beasts on our stream 5 times per week. Hop on twitch.tv/MarcelianOnline and catch us live playing all sorts of shenanigans and hoping we could defeat those elusive elevator bosses and standard verticality problems. Well, that's just me though. I'm projecting. With that being said, curses. Oh yeah, curses are back, dear viewer, and boy are they okay. They're just okay. Curse of Weakness is probably the one you will find the most uses for. Curse of Tongues can work here and there on some key casters, and I can see this being a thing in very high keys where tanks can sometimes be shredded by magic casts. That and Curse of Exhaustion can make a difference in the overall utility kit that you can bring to a group. It's a bit awkward considering how many globals you can press and should press as an Affliction, so the decision to use them will be something to debate. Demonic Circle is also baseline right now. This is a major boost in mobility, especially since there are a lot of predictable mechanics in dungeons that can force you to go from A to B consistently. This is a nice quality of life change since you probably wanted to get this since forever, but was always on a competitive row. However, not all is peachy. For a super specific and good reason that I cannot recall at the moment, Summon Demon is now a 6-second cast that can be reduced to 0.5 seconds with Fel Domination every 3 minutes. The only real-time summoning pets have been an issue were when soloing content or doing dungeons and they just die. Sometimes they die a couple of times per fight, and this change, even with Fel Domination, is horrible. But hey, maybe pet AI can be improved and it won't matter anymore. Now to some core shit. Unstable Affliction underwent a couple of good changes over the course of the alpha and beta, and now it's, I wouldn't be surprised if it changed again. I actually hope it will be because it's dog shit right now, my opinion. Don't get me wrong, it does a buttload of damage, but that's just it. It's a castable dot that can be used on only one target. Like, it wasn't punishing enough having to sit through casting your third castable dot among the 3 instances that you already have. That's a lot of GCDs you go through. In single target it's not that bad, but in AoE it adds an overwhelming priority dynamic that we will go over in a bit. Malefic Rapture is a new spell and the shard consumption option since Unstable Affliction no longer eats soul shards. When casting Malefic Rapture, you damage all targets that are already affected by any of your dots, and this will also deal 100% more damage per dot on the target. This is where AoE combat can become tricky and actually fun to figure out. You have so many dots you can apply, and juggling all of them and deciding when to rapture is pretty fun. This is basically a replacement of the Death Bolt skill with a similar mechanic. You want to rapture when the most amount of dots are out without waiting too long that will cause you to lose out on potential damage. And lastly, baseline, Shadow Embrace is no longer a talent, but part of your kit. It works the same, Haunt and Shadow Bolt, or Drain Soul if you've talented it, will apply a 3% shadow damage taken debuff on your target that can stack 3 times. 9% extra shadow damage is pretty good. And another thing to manage in terms of debuffs. Affliction is starting to really pack some serious administrative punches and feels like the Affliction of old, but new still with all the stuff that's going on. Scouring Tithe is the class ability you get with the Kyrians of Bastion. On paper it's good, but there are so many things you need to do, keep track of, maintain, that this seems like debuff bloat. It's good, but hot diggity, do you never get the chance to breathe, even for a second. I guess that's pretty good. We wanted specs to be more, to have more depth. and it's definitely better than before, but a bit exhausting, I think. Is this the best way to do it? It feels like death and complexity should come also in the forms of decisions. Decisions between A and B. But the way this looks like is that there's no decision to make. You want A, B, C, D, E, and 3 more on top of it all at the same time. Decimating Bolt from the Necrolords of Maldraxxus is more straightforward. It empowers your Shadow Bolt, and hey, if you talent into Drain Soul for the double dip into execute damage, you will freaking wreck some faces. I personally tested it with Nightfall in dungeons. It actually felt pretty nice to shoot out Empower Shadow Bolts left and right. Pew pew, it was pretty nice. And if you ever wanted to be like Gul'dan, like from the movies, then you go with Night Fae and use Soul Rot. As Affliction Warlock, this is maybe the most satisfying skill to use in the game. You essentially debuff your enemy with a dot that can also be casted on 3 nearby targets. When you drain life from one of them, you drain life from all of them. There's a legendary and a conduit that empowers drain life, and also a new drain life talent from an Azurite trait. The damage is mediocre if you pair this all up together. It can be good with all of these, but you have to put so many eggs in one basket just to get an okay-ish damage gain. Wish they could buff this so that drain life can become a build and no warlock will need healers ever again. Isn't that the dream though? And lastly, Impending Catastrophe from the Venthyr is okay. It's a strong dot and it actually works with Malefic Rapture. When you cast it, a big ass ball of doom travels to your target, damaging shit in its path and detonating at the end, applying a strong dot in an AoE fashion and a random curse on targets that it hits. The curse can be either weakness or tongues, and it does not have a smart targeting AI, where you would get the tongues on casters and weakness on physical attackers, so that part of the skill is just a hit or miss, you know, coin flips. I can see this being good in AoE, where you would throw a Seed, Catastrophe, and instantly start Malefic Rapturing in AoE after just 2 globals, as opposed to putting Agony on everything, Corruption on everything, an Unstable Affliction out, and Malefic Rapture after, provided you didn't take Vile Taint also. A lot of stuff. Since Deathbolt moved to the PvP talent section and 2 others became baseline, you have some new shit. Inevitable Demise takes the role of Deathbolt on the first row. This was previously an Azurite trait, now it increases the damage of your next drain life by 15% every time Agony deals damage to a target, stacking up to 50 times. This is purely for fun. It doesn't seem to be worth replacing Drain Soul in single target, but then again, maybe you don't like Drain Soul or the RNG nature of Nightfall. Combining it with Soul Rot is mega fun, if only the damage would be worth it. To replace Demonic Circle, you have Howl of Terror returning / this is a good addition to the utility kit because you had it before, one that you lost over the ages, but it's back. It's new, but it's not new, but you know how it is. Shadowlands. It does have a small risk added to it where shit can be feared into other shit, but in an organized setting, people would immediately follow it up with some AoE damage, since you would probably want to just use this to break casts that cannot usually be kicked. And lastly, where Shadow Embrace used to be, you now have Dark Color to reduce the cooldown of Dark Glare by 1 minute. This will make it align with Dark Soul if you pick it and just give you more Dark Glares overall, which is nice to have in your kit for especially M+ scenarios where shorter cooldowns perform better even if they are usually weaker. Since Dark Glare also works on stuff like the Impending Catastrophe dot, you can add some serious AoE pressure on big packs. Legendaries are one of the hot new things that are not new but still welcome. In Shadowlands, you will loot items that are actually legendary powers. Learn them, then use them to infuse items with them so you can actually craft your actual legendary. There are a bunch of universal ones, a few warlock specific, and 4 affliction specific. Although from the beta testing, it seems like one of those legendaries has specific effects for all of the specs but can be used by all 3, but changes for each spec. I don't know if that's a bug, probably a bug. Malefic Wrath makes Malefic Rapture increase the damage of your next Shadow Bolt or Drain Soul by 25%, stacking up to 3 times. This could be a legendary to go with the Necrolord's Covenant for some massive Drain Souls. You could be looking at some serious execute damage. Depending on how it scales, the buffs probably will be additive and not multiplicative, but still, it's a lot of damage. Perpetual Agony of Akir, did I say that right? Makes Agony have a 20% increased chance to generate a soul shard. This could be a simpler way to play in AoE where you need as many shards for Rapture as you can possibly get. It still means putting Agony on a lot of mobs consistently. So maybe I'm just opposed to tap targeting 10 times before I have my dots set up in a fast-paced gameplay of 2020. Is that too much? I would like to see a legendary making Agony apply to 2 targets instead, or 3, or 2 with just a 5% extra chance to generate a soul shard. Speaking of Agony, Wrath of Consumption is another attempt at dealing with AoE scenarios by making targets that die with Agony on them buff you for 5% more damage dealt, stacking 5 times and lasting 20 seconds. I mean, in consistent pools, you can maintain a 25% bonus damage dealt as long as you kill at least one thing every 20 seconds or less. This is pretty cool since it adds another dynamic on your spec that doesn't just flood your rotation. And lastly, it's back! Sacrolash's Dark Strike from Legion, making Corruption deal 15% increased damage and slowing targets affected by 60% movement speed. Wow, this is what made Affliction top tier in M+, and it's good to see back. We can argue that a permanent 60% slow is crazy, but hey, we live in a world of frost mages and crippling poison AoE rogues, so you decide. Thing is, tank kiting is not as big of a thing now as it was in Legion, so might not be as strong practically, but it's OP in PvP though, so Soulbinds are the other hot new shit coming in this next expansion. They act as pseudo or secondary talent trees to further deepen your spec, kinda. So Soulbinds are dudes and dudettes that belong to your covenant and you pick the one you want, just like at a bar when you pick up chicks. And just like picking up chicks at a bar, the Soulbind will not always give you what you want or expect or what was promised. The thing is, some of the traits are empty and that's what you put in, just like at a bar when picking up chicks. To unlock the desired conduits, you go down a path that might take you away from certain Soulbind traits. One example is Mechanicos from the Kyrians with his Hammer of Genesis trait. Getting this haste buff will force you to take 2 defensive conduits, which will really impact your performance, if the haste is enough to make it worth it. While Marilith from the Necrolords has Plagueis Preemptive Strike that will get you to sack only 1 potency conduit so you can have a damage boost. Not as bad as Mechanicos, but maybe not ideal. Or maybe you don't care about all of that and just want the last trait on the list, kind of like Grove Invigoration from Nia, if Night Fae is your thing. The Soulbinds there have a lot of support and utility traits you could use and help your group with, but really, if you won't be going Necrolords for that sweet decimating bolt, then Venthyr with Nadia will definitely be your next best thing. Not only does she have Dauntless Duelist, which will be really good no matter what, but Thrill Seeker is a 20% haste boost. That haste is so fucking good, considering how many globals you want to dish out left and right. I mentioned conduits and that there are different types. The endurance/defensive ones work towards survivability through your powerful cooldowns by lowering their cooldowns, while the finesse ones targets mobility and utility like Demonic Circle, giving you a speed boost when you teleport. But really, the potency ones will be the bee's knees. Stuff like Cold Embrace will make your Shadow Embrace give you overall 3% more damage at rank 1, and yeah, it goes higher. Corrupting Leer is an odd one. Agony and Unstable Affliction will have a chance to reduce the cooldown of Summon Dark Glare. With the current gear level, I was still not getting it to align with Dark Soul, but with more haste, I can definitely see that happening and maybe even replacing the talent that reduces its cooldown for 1 minute. Falkness Malignancy is a bit devious. Malefic Rapture will deal 30% extra damage to targets under Unstable Affliction. This is good for a single target, but since Unstable can only be used on one target at a time, in PvE at least, this conduit has no interactions outside pure single target damage. Rolling Agony increases the duration of Agony by 4 seconds up to 8.3 seconds at rank 15. This has some build-defining implications. Picture this with Writhen Agony, Creeping Death, and the Corrupting Leer we just discussed. Put on top of it the Agony legendary for Soul Shards, and maybe in high AoE scenarios it will be just enough to have Agony and Corruption on targets and not worry about other stuff. Affliction went through some nerfs for good reason, although that's debatable. Right now, the single target playstyle is fairly straightforward, GCD heavy, but not that bad. The issue, personally, that I found was in AoE. There are a lot of things you could potentially do that are really cool. Apply damaging dots, apply damage amps, apply curses, use stuns and fears. The problem starts that whenever you are not in your DPS rotation, you lose a lot of ramp or have to sacrifice a lot of damage amps like Pure Dots for Malefic Rapture damage or Shadow Embrace, which does not look like something you want to have up in AoE. Too much of a pain to use. Seed of Corruption is still a major pain in the ass to use and talent into, because the talent associated with it is a dead steaming pile of BFA. I would consider using it if it made Seed also be instant cast. I don't even care if it only jumps to one target then. There are already so many buttons you can and should press in AoE so you can use your new AoE spell that any castable dot seems incredibly tedious to cast. Overall, Affliction has a better toolkit for AoE than in BFA, or should I say used to when it came out. The nerfs it got made it seem like you now still have to ramp towards dealing proper AoE damage, at least decently, to compete with other players and other specs. And it seemed like the entire purpose of Rapture was to negate the need to ramp. Maybe it's just the limited testing I was able to do. I am sure the Council of the Black Harvest community has more to say on this and maybe even more informed theory crafting that I highly recommend you guys check ASAP. And of course, thank you dear patrons for supporting our content, and we really appreciate everything that you do. Of course, it's not appreciated, but it does indeed help because we do this full time and it makes us be able to upgrade our quality of stuff, our gear, I'm looking like our new tools for our studio that are really cool, and you guys made that happen, so thank you very much. And if you dear viewer are interested in supporting us a little bit more, check the link down below for our Patreon page and maybe our merch page where you can buy our merch t-shirts, kind of like this. See, that has Horde on it. It was designed and drawn by Marcelian, believe it or not. Yeah, it's pretty cool. He actually made this shit in Photoshop. I don't even know where I can find paint. Thank you for watching the video. Stay awesome, and we'll see you next time.
I've been loving it then, I still love it now. Still, I play WoW. Still, I play WoW. Getting better every day, let me show you how. Cause still, I play WoW. Still, I play WoW. It's getting harder to stay, but at the end of the day, it's a guilty pleasure, so just log in and play. Whether it's classic or retail, I'ma do a /bow. Still, I play WoW.